full equity, full opportunity, full access for all of our citizens. I hope Africa too will rise to that challenge. And we all have responsibility to make a contribution to it from wherever we are, whatever we do, to ensure that this change, this momentum of change is not lost, and we don't see ourselves slipping back into old habits, old attitudes, old processes that have kept Africa so far behind. This is our time for change.
Madam, your words resonate, and they're at the core of the UN's deepest mantra, which is to leave no one behind, especially in this COVID-19 reality that we face, this future that we face. That's why, in particular, I'm very pleased to introduce your next intervener. She's in Uganda, but she's actually from South Sudan. She's seeking, or she has asylum in Uganda, because she's a refugee in Uganda from South Sudan, but she's many more things than that, and she'll tell you herself. She's standing by in our office in Uganda. Her name is Susan Grace Duku. Susan, if you're there, please pose your question to Madam.
Madam President, my name is Susan Grace Duku, and some would say that I'm a refugee woman. That's true, but I'm many other things as well. I am the daughter of my mother, a strong South Sudanese woman. I'm a mother myself and a community leader. I've been a refugee twice. I currently live in Rhino settlement, which is almost 9 hours from the capital, Kampala, in Uganda. The Uganda government has been generous and offered us safety, and UNHCR has given us a lot of support. But I must tell the truth. Our lives are very difficult, particularly for women and girls. But I must tell the truth. Our food rations have been cut by a third, and we struggle to grow crops because of climate change. The areas we live in has been hit by drought and then heavy rains. Many of our men see girls and women as commodities, only useful for being married off, having children and bringing in cows. Most teenage girls are prevented from continuing with their education and made to be mothers by force. We want to be seen as human beings with rights and as people who can help to bring peace to South Sudan. But few of us are involved in any of the peace negotiations or the current leadership. This is why we do not have peace yet. Your Excellency, I see you as the president of our African women. As you know, refugees do not choose to flee. We flee only when we have no choice. My question is, how can you and others here tonight find a lasting solution to our conflict, which has dragged on for so many years? And how can our lives be made better while we are still refugees? Thank you.
Susan, we cannot, all of us, not be moved by the situation you have just described, and by the situation you and your compatriots must suffer from time to time. The situation in South Sudan is a troubling one for all the leaders of Africa. Finding the resolution to it is always in the forefront of the agenda. Our regional communities have also tried to see how they can reach out to support the processes of peace, the processes of development, and the protection of people in South Sudan. It's been difficult to do. The Secretary General of the United Nations himself have called for the silencing of guns. He's called for the ending of conflict. And all of that is an encouragement for nations to adopt those policies that are going to stop the wars, that are going to enable countries like South Sudan to rise up from what they have suffered for decades, allowing their people not to have the opportunity, like others, to be able to progress, to be able to achieve their dreams and their goals. We have 1325 that has called for the protection of women. We're coming to the 20th anniversary of 1325. What will we do? What will women do? What will the world do in reacting to the fact that it's been 20 years and we still have to listen to your story, Suzanne? Your story of hurt and anger because of what you're going through. We're going to Beijing plus 25. When all our countries signed that there was going to be national agenda for the promotion of women and the participation of women. And we still are behind. There have been progress, no doubt, tremendous progress in many areas. But we haven't solved the problem for you yet, Grace, Susan. And so how can we do more? We sign accords and protocols, but we haven't implemented them in a meaningful way that will make a difference. We have to keep looking to leaders. We have to make strong calls to the leadership to see you in what you go through as an example of what needs to be a part of this call for change. So that you too, Susan, can come to the time when you cannot say the things you just said. When you can say, now I feel that I am equal to everyone in every way. That's the challenge for our leaders. And we must all continue to encourage them, work with them, recognize what they've done, the progress been made, but still say to leaders, more needs to be done. Susan should not have to tell that story. You go with everything, Susan. I feel for you. And we're sure that so many others in this audience feel the same way. We will all be the advocate and the ambassadors for the change that is needed to help you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Susan spent more than 10 hours trying to get to the office, and she has another trek back. So we want to thank you so much for joining us, Susan. That was quite powerful. Thank you. Moving on, we have a question. I'm going to take some questions that have been coming in. There've been a lot of comments based on what you've said, but one in particular jumps out. The UNDP is the technical lead in the UN's COVID response and recovery efforts going forward into 2021. It's got a big job to do. You have, as we said in your resume, a very, very unique perspective. So this question applies to that. It's from Mathu Siowela, who says, Madam President, thank you for your inspiring presentation. You're a former president, minister, and you held high positions in international institutions, UN, UNDP, and the World Bank. Now, looking back, Madam, can you tell us what 4 critical points in Africa we face in development challenges? And more specifically, if you were in the UNDP again today, what would you do differently?
4 critical
Yes.
challenges. Is that what it is, Mark?
Yeah, 4 critical development challenges. Yeah, the points. Yes, and how to reverse those.
I guess the first one is the promotion of agriculture. I think we've forgotten that the biggest asset we have in all of our country is land. And land put to use prevents hunger, prevents famine, provide the means for being able to generate the exports that will lead to the resources for the rebuilding of the country. I think the environment and what we've seen in the last 2 decades happening to our livelihood, our lives, tells us that now is time to address that. Energy is sometimes called the dark continent, and I don't think it's because of the color of our skin. I think it's because you don't have to go very far out of a capital city before you have total darkness. And of course, if you don't have energy, you're not going to be able to develop the industries, be able to provide the learning experiences in education, in health. And so we have to, and I believe that is not only one of the development challenges, but one of the priorities. Everything I said as a development challenge is a priority for Africa. Good governance. Good governance where systems enable better transparency and accountability that leads to more integrity and thereby battles that with which so many of our countries face from time to time, the corruption enemy that we all face. And so good governance has to be, as a whole, much that goes into good governance. People participation, civil society, democracy, all of those. But I put that all in one bundle as some of those things that we need to do. UNDP has a great role to play in this, has always been carrying a role. What can we do differently in UNDP? I must say that UNDP needed to get closer to the people. And you do have rest reps, no doubt about it. But let me go back to what Akin said about humility, interaction, those things that the front runners, the first responders of UNDP have to exhibit that. I'm glad that we were able to accelerate the pace of women participation, not only in leadership, but throughout the system of UNDP. And I'm glad to see that my successors have, to a large extent, followed that. I think the big challenge now, something I couldn't do, is what can be done more in the area of technology to provide capacity enhancement, to all of those with whom UNDP serves. Digital technology, which is now a prime mover of any progress in society. How can UNDP ensure that they become one of those? They have this responsibility already in COVID-19. I think the responsibility that UNDP as the technical lead for COVID-19, gives the opportunity for more to be done in that respect. The training of people, those in the small and medium-sized enterprises that would not have opportunity if they not get the support from an entity such as UNDP. So Ahuma, everything that she's doing in this new agenda that's going to put people in charge of their own destinies, that decision making is going to come from them, and that priorities are going to be established in full coherence with national priorities. I think that's what UNDP is going to be looked at for how they carry out the new agenda that is now being formulated.
Your Excellency, I said that we had quite an eclectic mix of interveners. Madam, if I might, your final intervener, because we're rounding up, coming to the end of this incredible session, is last but certainly not least. I think they describe her generation as the generation that comes after Generation Z, which is Generation Alpha. I had to Google that because she's 10 years old. Her name is Dorisan Cecilia Bala, and she's a grade 6 student, and she's in your home country of Liberia, and she's standing by. Dorisan, are you there? If you're there, please ask your question.
Good afternoon or good morning to everyone. Special greetings to Her Excellency Madame Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. My name is Doris and Cecilia Bala. My aim is to be a lawyer and leader in Liberia when I grow up. As former president of Liberia, Madame Sirleaf, can you please tell me what I should do now to be like you?
Dorison, I love the way you're starting it very early.
Yes.
So your journey is going to be long, but I can see that commitment is right there. Believe in yourself and what you want to be and what you want to do. Get the best education that you can, as much as you can, as high as you can go. If you decide, like you just said, that you're going to follow me, though you're going to be many years coming to that, do not be discouraged by those who will try to discourage you. And if there are obstacles and they try to tell you don't, just stand firm. Tell them you can make a difference when you become that leader. Tell them you can rise above anybody who tried to discourage you or any obstacles you face. And now and then, things will not work out. But don't be afraid of that too. I failed so many times. But I rose above those failures and just recommitted and stayed the course, stayed focused on it. And let me say, don't feel you're entitled because you're a woman. No. Say that you feel you want to be that because you're a human being that's equal to everything that any other person has, man or woman. You're equally endowed, you're equally capable, you're equally ready to take on the responsibility of leadership. Listen to others. Be ready to help to uplift others as young as you are, your friends, your schoolmates, your playmates. Let them see you as one who they believe in, who they love, who they feel can help them who they feel that they can come to you if they need some answer.
Okay.
We know that our political leaders, will need to do more because political leadership, and that's a word for you too, it's not about being perfect. I was not perfect. I had many faults, many problems, many failures. But I think I did the right thing most of the time in the interest of the country and for the protection of the people. And just remember when you take leadership, that you're there to serve the people. You're not there to amass personal wealth. You're there to serve. And with your team and a good agenda based on your vision, Dorison, you can
Yes.
make it. You can make it. So stay with your goal.
Thank you.
And thank you, Doris. And I want you to go to the chat room now, because there's so many people who are writing in and saying, go for it, Doris, and you're great, Doris. And so go read what people are saying about you. We've come to close to the end. And so all remains for me to do is hand over to the director of RBA, Ahuna, for her to have the final word. Ahuna, please, you have the floor.
Mark, before Ahuma sits, because I want Ahuma to say a word about this. How do we encourage more participation of women in politics? How do we bring about these changes for women to become the leaders that we know they are capable of? So I know you have your prepared text and listen, but I need for you to comment on that too. So it's my time to ask you a question, Ahuma.
The tables are turned.
That's fair, Your Excellency. But before I answer that, I just want to say a big thank you to you for being you. I think all the comments coming through show one consistency. They see a compassionate leader. They see a woman of grace. And it is the tone, it's the wisdom, also the way it is delivered. I think that's touching so many hearts across the world right now. And we are so, so inspired by you. How do we encourage systems that will promote more women in leadership positions, not just as political leaders, but also women who sit at the decision-making table that decide on whether countries are peaceful or not. As we heard from Susan today, how do we create a world where the likes of Susan are at the table, telling their stories and influencing the way decisions go? This is our mission in UNDP and in the UN as a whole. And as you know, 2 weeks ago, you and I were on another platform where we were discussing with the African Union this very topic. And UNDP has put its assets at the disposal of the world in co-creating with the African Union these new systems and opportunities for women to engage. Because we know that the world that we seek now to have, a world that is more equal and a world that is more sustainable, cannot happen without women at the table where decisions are being made. So in our country offices where we're present, we are working with governments, with civil society, with academia to position women and provide training opportunities, provide opportunities for access to finance, provide opportunities for, defeating this negative cultural influences that put women down, that put these fences around women that Susan described, the violence. Because when you are facing violence, domestic or otherwise, on a daily basis, it limits your own capacity to participate. So there are so many things that we have to do. The education, the advice you just gave our young Doreen, the fact that women, girls have to be given equal opportunity to rise to the highest level of education. And they should not be condemned to having to do all the housework and lose those opportunities. So it's a whole value chain of supports that we provide in the development practice that needs to be brought on board. But, you know, Madam President, the biggest challenge for women to rise to political leadership positions is what you yourself experienced. You have often told the story of the price, the high price you had to pay to become president of Liberia. And no other woman, you said, should have to pay that price. Exactly. So too, our mission has to be about making it easy for women to rise to those positions without the level of sacrifice that you had to make. Sacrifice in terms of family, but sacrifice in terms of your own integrity and dignity. So I think that we have a work cut out for us there. And I just want to say, in closing, we're not going to summarize this, Mark. It's impossible to summarize. Everything that you have said is best said in the tone and the voice that you have given it. And that's why it's been important to record this meeting and to have it on YouTube for people to go back and really digest all the wisdom that we had put on the table. But I just want to finish with, you know, I think where you ended in your advice to a young 10-year-old, looking at leadership as service, as a service. I happen to believe that if all Africa's leaders got into those positions with that principle that they are there to serve the people who have elected them to position, we will have a completely different Africa today. That remains the fundamental ingredient for success for Africa. It's leaders who rise with a consciousness that they are there to serve. And if the next generation of Africa's leaders, and this is a very young continent, and you talked about transformation and young people were asking, how do we prepare ourselves to help lead that transformation? It is indeed in getting yourself armed with this concept that leadership is for service.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we have picked from you today, Madam President. We believe that as leader of Liberia and of Africa, you put your life to service. And that's what made the difference with Ebola survival. That's what made the difference with creating peace and consolidating it in Liberia. And that's what earned you the Nobel Peace Prize. So thank you so much for continuing to be here for us and to weigh in on that transformation that the continent must now undertake.
Thank you, Ahuna.
Mark?
Yes, I'm just starting my video again. Thank you very much, Ahuna. And I want to say thank you also to the administrator for joining us. It was quite wonderful to have him kick off the proceedings. But mostly, I think I want to thank the interveners and those people that posed questions in the Q&A box and in the chat in YouTube. It's really all about you. We had more than 300 people attend on this Zoom call and many hundreds more on YouTube. As you were speaking, I was scouring those chat comments, and I just want to end, Madam, rather than say thank you to you, Madam Sirleaf, myself, because for me, I'm one of the luckiest people in this virtual room. I get the opportunity to be the traffic warden in these types of things and hear from such inspirational people like yourself. It's a blessing. to have a job like mine. But I'll end with a comment from one of the attendees, Antonia Joy, and she says, "Thank you very much, Madam Sirleaf. You're full of wisdom and grace. You make me feel it is possible to have impactful leadership. As an African woman passionate about the role of trade, industry, and investment for Africa's development, I'm inspired to do more. I'll take this with me forever. Thank you very much. May God's grace continue to abound in your life." I can say nothing else. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
And thank you very much, madam. And that concludes the end of this Hekima series. Remember, it remains on YouTube, so send the link around, and we'll see you again next month, where we'll have another of Africa's deepest thinkers. For now, this concludes this Hekima series. Once again, a very, very warm thank you to our great thinker, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. That's the end. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mark.
One sentence from me. Ubuntu Agumuntu Ligabantu.
Wonderful. Our collective humanity, indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.